required as far as. There we go. Awesome. That's fine.
You.
All right. Now the technology is solved. It is 9:06. And I'm calling to order the Community Mental Health Board of Directors meeting. First on the agenda is the invocation, and our board member, Tom Bird, has agreed graciously to provide our invocation today.
By way of introduction to the invocation, I think we're all struck with the fact that our society is stressed with division, mistrust, lack of harmony. Anyone who witnessed the debate last night couldn't help but be aware of that. But it's a symptom that permeates our world on the international level, in our federal government, our state government, our local government. We have issues that seem to divide us rather than help us work together. And I was struck by the words of the Apostle Paul as he wrote to the Corinthian church. They had a similar problem. They had many gifted, talented people who were not getting along very well. There was turmoil, distrust, their egos and pride kept them from working together. And after rebuking them in chapter 12, he went on into chapter 13 saying, I give you a better way, God, a way of love. And he used the Greek word agape, which reflects God's love. And he said, you need to adopt that attitude and work together for the good. And you need to show love, respect, patience, humility, and trust. And I think it's a message that resonates with all of us in every area of our lives, particularly here today as we join as a board. So let me offer the following prayer. God of creation, creator of the universe, giver and sustainer of life, we recognize that you've given us individual skills, talents, and abilities. You've placed us here to do the good work of this agency. And we humbly ask for wisdom, for patience, and an attitude of humility as we strive to work together to promote and deliver the critical services which so many of our county residents rely upon. Bless our work, bless our faithful and our dedicated staff in their work. We ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. All right. Moving on to item number 3, it's Community Mental Health of Ottawa County's mission and vision statement. The mission statement is Community Mental Health of Ottawa County partners with people with mental illness, intellectual and developmental disabilities, and substance use disorders, and the broader community to improve the lives and be a premier mental health agency in Michigan. Our vision is Community Mental Health of Ottawa County strives to enhance quality of life for all residents. Moving on to item number 4 is public comment. If you have a public comment, please come forward to the podium and state where your name and where you vote. You have 3 minutes to speak, and please address the chair. Good morning.
Today's the last day I can say that. Want to let you know that the chapter in Ottawa County, the ARC Advocacy and Resource Center, and the ARC of Michigan are coming together to become one entity. The new entity will be called the ARC of the Lake Shore, and that will be finalized sometime this summer. The Attorney General's office has all the paperwork, and it's just the formality of all of that happening. So I wanted to let you know that we will be maintaining an office here in Ottawa County. We have a special ed advocate who will be dedicated to Ottawa County, and the ARC Muskegon will be bringing a number of services to Ottawa County to support families who have persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We're going to make sure that it will be continuing and it will be better for families in Ottawa County.
Thank you.
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah, I'm
I
curious.
just want to say thank you. I know that you've been passionate about what you do for so long. So just thank you so much for all the time, energy, and effort. And you're a mom just like the rest of us. So you had double. So thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Good morning.
pretty much all that you know. At the end of your last meeting, I stood here, you know, and you both asking if you would please reach out to me if you had any concerns so that I could tell you about. I didn't hear from you. So I'm here once again to try to explain that my work is about helping people to find community, helping people not to feel broken and small. Some of you have accused the Momentum Center of being an activist organization. I need you to understand the difference between activism and advocacy. Nonprofits are not allowed to engage in activism related to specific pieces of legislation or specific candidates. Advocacy is the process of making one's voice heard on issues that affect people's lives. Most nonprofits can and do engage in advocacy. Advocacy is about seeing needs and inviting everyone to listen to each other so that together we can find solutions. I will continue to advocate for people who are marginalized because I feel I have a moral responsibility to do so. I have to speak for those who are voiceless. I have to stand up for those who are invisible. I have strength and I have learned the skills of resiliency, which means I am equipped to stand between bullies and the bullied and take the blows myself. We are in a mental health crisis, but 60% of people with mental illness will never get treatment because of stigma. Stigma happens when falsehoods about mental illness and the mingling of populations are perpetuated. People fear what they don't know. So we, both me and you, the Community Mental Health Board, must continue to learn ourselves so that we can dismantle that fear and create a healthier environment for everyone. I believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. So I invite you once more, come tour the Momentum Center and meet some of the most incredible human beings you will ever find. Sit down with me and share with me your journey. Tell me what concerns you, what troubles you about our work so that I can better understand and better explain. And finally, I want to thank all of the people who reached out to me after the last meeting to see if I was okay. People I didn't even know reaching out with compassion and concern, and that gives me hope. Because the truth is that all of us know what it is to feel broken and small. And it is only through each other, in community, in spaces like the Momentum Center, that we will find healing.
Thank you. Are there further public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent items. Do I have a motion to approve the consent following items? And that is A, agenda for June 28th, 2024, CMH Board of Directors meeting, and B, minutes for the June 3rd, 2024, CMH Board of Directors meeting.
So moved.
Support.
Support. Is there discussion?
I did have a question of clarification regarding our minutes from last month. I thank you for putting in the letters from the communications from DHHS regarding the process to getting to our interim director appointment. Looking at the reply from DHHS on the 30th, at the tail end of that, it puts down a due date for response. Was there a reason we were given a due date for response that was 2 weeks prior to when we actually had to have that decision made? It just seems to be, it runs counter to our policy, and it just seems, I'm not quite sure why DHHS, I had wondered if there was any sort of explanation as to why it needed to be done so expeditiously, because that essentially cut the search time that you put out at the previous meeting by almost 2/3. It took it from a potential of 5 weeks to 2 weeks, and that doesn't necessarily seem to be, it seems like we cut ourselves short. And I was wondering if there was any pushback to that or why that was put there in the first place.
And I don't know if Anna was the one that originated the communication with MDHHS, if I remember correctly. Did you ever hear, Anna, why they expedited the due date? Yeah, and they are, I think, they're our partner in our decision making, but I think ultimate authority as well. So it was a scramble, honestly.
Well,
Commissioner.
and I appreciate that
Yeah.
completely. I mean, and that's why the notion of taking that, I mean, it effectively narrowed that search window to about 8 days from 4 weeks. So, I mean, from our point of view, it would have been, perhaps better for us to have asked for clarification on that. But so I wasn't sure if there was anything else that I was missing, but that was really all that I had. I mean,
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may
Mr. Byrd.
comment on that, my understanding is, I believe that we were working under the assumption that the trigger date would be the date that Lynn ceased her employment with the agency. And we built a clock from that point forward. I think DHS interpreted it as the date we received her letter of resignation, and they started the clock at that point, which put us up against a shorter window.
okay, well, that would have been a handy detail to kind of like get squared away. Because that, I mean, that did just, it truncated everything that we've done thus far. And I feel like I feel like DHHS inadvertently put a level of instability into our search process that necessarily need to be there. So that's all.
Discussion? And the good news is, though, we had 2 qualified candidates, because I do believe, from what I've heard, historically, it took 8 months to fill the position prior. So I think we're really fortunate in that case. All right. So do we need to go to a roll call vote on this, since we do have finances contained within?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Voting to approve the minutes from the agenda for today and the minutes from June 3rd.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Motion passes. All right. Moving on to item number 6, it's the interim executive director's report with Dr. Michael Brashears. Good morning.
Is this on?
You
Good morning.
really have
Hear
to
me?
lean in.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I got a lot to talk about, so I'll try to do it concisely. I did email a copy of the summary of my report this morning. There are a couple of things I need to add to it that I'll speak about that will be in the minutes. And then I'll later revise some items on this report, because I do send this report out to all CMH employees. So I want to make sure if there's any other stuff I talk about in my report that didn't make my written report, they add it. So the minutes will reflect the full scope of the discussion here. And I'm going to add a couple of things after the meeting that I omitted when I was putting this together. When I'm putting together the director's report, it was my original intent to try to get it out to you in advance. I was naive to think that things wouldn't happen between the time I sent it out on Monday till Friday. And quite frankly, there are things happening on an everyday basis as I continue my evaluation of our system that makes it necessary to walk in this report the day of the meeting, because like yesterday, things happened that I would want to include. So please forgive me, because in the past, I wanted to get this out to you several days in advance. And I'm finding that's not going to be possible because things change literally every day. So my intent is to have a written summary of my statements here, the minutes to be added, but then to make sure that the community employees have access to this. So there's a couple of different levels. At the state level, there's a whole bunch of going on, but I want to just highlight 2 of them again. Today, we're going to have a presentation or a chance to ask questions from the Community Mental Health Association of Michigan, kind of like our trade union. And we have the second in charge here today. So there's a later agenda item that hits item 1 on conflict-free and planning. I want to reiterate my position on this issue. I support and we support conflict access and planning. Absolutely. What we're going to have difficulty is supporting, and you'll get more information today, on the state's methodology. They intend to roll out some guidelines on October related to this. It is possible to support conflict-free planning and access and oppose the state's methodology. And so later today, I've included under new business a discussion session related to that so that you can ask questions right from the organization that keeps sending us all this information that I forward you. And you're like, what is this? Interpret? I'm like, we're bringing Alan down and he's going to tell us. So Alan is here today to answer that. Yesterday, the state of Michigan passed their budget. And there's a couple of key elements that over the next several weeks, I'm going to be examining and then presenting to the board of a possible impact to the community mental health budgets. Some of the highlights I've bolded is that the state is approving another $161 million for certified community behavioral health clinics, or CCBHCs. I will make sure I understand the detail of this and what that means for us. We have CCBHC funding already as Ottawa, and I need to understand the impact to our existing program and then what this funding does. Does this funding help create additional CCBHC sites that don't have to be CMHs, or what the deal is? So if you hear about that in the headline, that the governor's budget's like, it's heavy on mental health, it actually is heavy on mental health from one section and very light, and I'm shocked with this, very light on the traditional funding, that no major increases for our main Medicaid budget that we have with the state that supports all of our services for developmental disabilities and for mentally ill outside of the CCBHC arrangement. I know it's a little complicated, but what I'm telling you is the budget really didn't do much, my first look at it yesterday, to bolster the core funding that we have. And I won't put Alan on the spot, but he might have something to say about that from the association. Now, the thing is, our own CCBHC program can be confusing if you're not really understanding what the original purpose was for it, what the funding streams are, how that's different from our regular traditional services. And I know in the past we've tried to educate both the board and the community about it, but in the month of July, I will be putting together another examination of that funding stream and program to really get a sense of what is our model here at Ottawa in implementing this funding stream or this concept. I'll tell you, I've been in this field for 20-something years, and it's confusing. I can't imagine the community and the board trying to, what is it again? How are we doing it again? And our staff just trying to do the best. So in July, I will be once again looking at that particular program and understanding it. And in August, bringing a formal presentation on Ottawa's CCBHC model and its impact to the community and what the original goals and intentions are, what our metrics are, what our success is. And then this will make this budget line item make sense. But what I wanted to highlight to the board is that there was nothing in the governor's budget that significantly addressed true mental health needs within the system besides these items here. And it was quite shocking to me. And so there's other things that may impact us. There's some stuff with substance use disorders and treatments, 25 million added. Now, 25 million for an entire state. I don't know. It's not a lot of money. 7.2 million to ensure that people have access to Michigan crisis lines, right? Okay. I want to make sure the money is spent not only in identifying who's in a crisis, but what the heck we do with them after the crisis. We have so many mechanisms now that identify who needs care. How about the funding to actually provide it? So you can tell by my demeanor, I'm very disappointed in what I read. And what I'm going to be doing is doing an analysis of the budget with my colleagues across the state and doing an impact to our community based on this. The press is they're addressing mental health. Barbara was up here in public comment saying mental health is a crisis. This budget from the state doesn't address that crisis in a meaningful way. Does not. And the communities are owed this. If it's a crisis, let's fund it appropriately. And hey, I'm all for funding for CMHC, CBHCs, the whole thing, but the traditional Medicaid and general fund dollars to help us, there's nothing built in this. And they're going to say it's because we're negotiating contracts and whatnot, but there was no meaningful gesture to assist us. There's nothing targeted for self-determination, nothing targeted for these things. So I'm a little bit annoyed this morning. I apologize, and I may be misinterpreted, but I'm pretty smart when I'm reading this, and I'm going to get a consensus from my colleagues on what the impact is to this thing. Good start, misses the mark, is my initial impression of this budget. I will provide the link to the community and the board to review it themselves. I'm sure the board association, our CMH board association, will have not necessarily a report card, but a review on this. And of course, we're going to celebrate the victories, but identify the gaps. So from a state issue, we have a movement to deal with conflict-free in a budget that doesn't actually support the activities that would make that possible. So that's kind of like an introduction to the state issues that I have. I don't know if you want to ask questions on that now or wait till I'm done. I have quite a few things. It's up to you.
I wrote down, so just to identify, so CCBHC is a grant, correct?
It's a funding stream. It looks like a grant, but it's actually a funding stream of Medicaid that we're allowed to use to expand our service array and to pay for services already. So it has all of the features of a grant and a demonstration project, but it's actually more robust than that. And that's why we need to do an examination here of really understanding that, because it obligates us to certain activities. And so with all of our contracts moving forward, I'm going to have to add a component. What does it obligate it to us? Is it in our original scope and vision? And what's the benefit of doing it? And with CCBHC, there's definitely some benefits in utilizing the funding. But we have to make sure we've already obligated ourselves that we're meeting our obligations.
I think when it was originally introduced, it was a SAMHSA grant, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, there were different phases of it. There was a grant and turned into a demonstration project and things like that.
And my concern has always been, as we start to build basically some of the tools beneath CCBHC, that's something that we can do for a long period of time, a long-term
Yes.
strategy associated with
Yeah.
it. So when asked to fund 8 positions using CCBHC money, the concern was it was $2 million
Sure.
that, people's jobs are on the line, basically.
Yeah, if you can't
for how
sustain it,
long, if you
sure.
can't sustain it, if the grant eventually goes away.
Yeah, and you'll hear later in my report here that all contracts and all funding streams, we need to look at those very questions. And you can hear later that I'm going to recommend a discussion on restructuring our board governance model to ensure that those discussions can happen. I'll just say it now. Right now, this particular board and the public are at a huge disadvantage, in my opinion, as an interim director. And the huge disadvantage is it's only at this particular meeting, that you get to ask questions as a group in a meaningful way about anything. So Robin had a great thing. What are we voting on? Right? It really is this day that the public and you, for the first time, have to decipher all of the stuff that's come and vote. To me, that is inappropriate. And I'm going to be making recommendations in July as an interim that you can look at for creating subcommittee structures of this board the public can attend, so there can be a drill down. So that, for example, Mr. Rockman doesn't have to ask 42 questions at the general board meeting, when we could have dived down to some of these issues in a subcommittee of the board and say finance and developed standards and what we want on these. Because right now you have a disadvantage. You got to read it and you got to trust us immediately. Well, if Beth has a question, All right, there you go. So the public does, so it's going to be an interim director recommendation. I made decision-making principles that I put in my report of when I decide to say, recommend a structural change. And as an interim, you don't want to do a lot of that because that's not fair who's going to be in that permanent seat in this board. But I am recognizing that our board governance model does not allow for the appropriate level of communication and due diligence on contracts or any other thing. And quite frankly, I'm happy that you're voting yes, but we got to drill down. We got to have areas, program and planning. If there's a grant, we could have a program and planning subcommittee. Tom, Rita used to chair that. You understand that. All of these grants go there. We talk about them. And then guess what? One of you gets to come to the board meeting and you're presenting the contracts because due diligence has happened. And then all of you don't have to become an expert on every aspect of the CMH system overnight. It's not fair and we need to change it. So I'll be making recommendations for your consideration in the month of July because these meetings go way too long now because you're asking questions. And if you don't, you're not meeting your statutorily obligations that you have as a board. And I can't allow this to keep happening as a director that works for you. So you'll see that in July for your consideration to look at it in communication with all of you, and you can discuss it and we can figure out a way to do it. So that helps with some of the other issues that we have in my director's report. And it helps explain when you have a contract that comes up to this board. It's the only shot you get to ask questions.
So can I ask a question?
Please.
So with all of that being said, a year ago, being brand new, I felt exactly like that. And I still kind of feel like I don't understand all of this, truthfully. So when I read CCBHC and the word health clinic in my head, I see someone actually walking into a clinic.
That was me the first week when I walked looking for the clinic.
So in my head, I see somebody walking into that clinic. Do we have, so if that's not right, because I don't know how they asked the question, are there people walking into that clinic to use
They're
it?
walking into CMH and other providers. CCBHC is a model of care. It's an evidence-based practice with ability, we have superimposed over our existing structure, and it allows for different activities in Medicaid services and certain things like crisis mobile and stuff like that, that we weren't able to do, that new funding's allowed us to do. But right now, and I may have it wrong, my initial assessment, 30 days in, everybody, it's a wonderful model superimposed our existing structure, but it is not a standalone. Literally, it was a joke. I was walking around, I was telling the staff, I'm walking around the first day, where's the CCBHC clinic? First of all, we don't have enough space for it, if we had it, but like, where is it? And they're looking at me like, what are you talking about? It's the same thing. Now, we have ways to contract with others to meet the requirements, but I intend to go through a comprehensive review of what we've committed ourselves to and what that means to both you and the public. And there's some really exciting things with it, but some things you got to go, well, wait a minute, let's be careful here. Because if you generalize this forever, what does this mean? And can we sustain it forever? And my initial answer is kinda. It's not no, it's kinda. And I've been working with directors across the state to get a better understanding. The staff we have internally that run it are catching me up to speed, but we need to understand all of our contract obligations to all of them. So I'll skip down to one of my other items. It's my intent in July, starting in July, to have board and community education days that people can come voluntarily, that will also record, where I intend to go over the major obligations based on the major contracts we have. For instance, we have a major contract for Medicaid through the state that's like, I don't know, how many million? 60? Medicaid? $62 million that a regional entity helps us manage. And the contract's actually between the state, the regional entity, and us, right? That's like the bulk of what we do. Do all of us know on the board and the community what the obligations of that contract are, what the services contract, connected to those services are, and how when you get a bill that comes, a contract that comes, we check Medicaid. And you're supposed to go, oh, I guess it's Medicaid. I guess it's good. Nope. So in July, I intend to look at every major funding source, Medicaid, general fund, and have opportunities for the board and the public to come and hear Dr. Brashears talking about our Medicaid contract. Dr. Brashears talking about our general fund contract. Dr. Brashears talking about the relationship between Ottawa County and the CMH department. I'm building a presentation on that. The public may not know that there's only a handful, 3 or 4 CMHs in the state that are county departments. We're one of them. 95% of all CMHs in the state are not county departments. That means the CMH board in those regions and those areas have the same role that you do, but don't have to contend with county government on top of it. So right now, if I review a position and I recommend it to you, it's got to go to the finance committee that luckily Gretchen chairs at the moment, and then the board of commissioners who don't even control that funding source approves. It's an extra layer. I don't know if the full members of our board in our community know that relationship and the impact of that. I intend to hold a session to educate people on that July and in August. Not to say we shouldn't be a county department, but to say, here's why it's confusing, and here's what the role of this board is, and especially my role. Under the mental health code, my role as the interim or executive director is supposed to be the chief executive officer for all of the contracts that CMHSP, that's us, manage. And I'm supposed to have complete responsibility and supervision of all CMH employees. So how do you do that in a county model? Well, it's a lot of working with people and building relationships. So I have that coming up on the agenda in a moment, but I intend to hold sessions. Funding source, what are we obligated to? What's the role of the CMH board? What's the purpose of the CMH system in Michigan? The board association has put out some documents. Alan's here, and what I'll say to Alan is, it's 17 pages, you're killing me. So we got to bring it down to workable bits because you need to have a degree in whatever to understand all the nuances of it. And we need the community to be able to go, well, no wonder why they're saying they don't do that. If I'm a community member, I have no idea. Like, what is this thing again? And what's the CCBHC? And is it a grant? I don't understand it. So that's what I intend to do in July. It's on my next steps that I'm going to be doing as part of my interim evaluation process. I've been in the process of doing a SWOT analysis. This is my internal SWOT analysis to help me as a tool to understand what's been going on in the system. I've been out of it for 11 years. So I've internally started a process where I'm looking at leadership group. They gave me their results. I sent to all of the board members a link to a questionnaire to fill out a SWOT analysis. There's just 4 or 5 questions. It doesn't take long. It takes about, 15, 20 minutes, Chris, right? If you haven't got that link, fill it in. I'm using that data. I'm having the same thing go to our regional entity partner, and I'm having their staff fill it out. What's their perspective on us? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I'm going to send this to county departments. What do you think of us? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, threats. And then finally, in August, I'm going to post on our website an opportunity for any community member or provider to do the same thing. I'm going to then, in early August, I'm going to then get all that information, and it'll be part of the interim director's recommendation based on the first 60 days of evaluation. This board may choose to use it as part of your official SWOT analysis or not, but it's data that you can use. But I am not replicating the obligation of the executive committee of the board. This is an internal process that I am doing to gather data and information, which I'll hand over to the board for consideration. Does that make sense? Do you see I'm doing it systemically? Starting with leadership, moving to the board, moving to the region, moving to our providers, moving to our consumers. And I'm going to get all that information and look at the key themes that will help build a strategic plan recommendation. And so far, the results have been good. And I know some of you haven't done it yet, but the ones I've received so far, very good. And the leadership team did a good job answering those questions. But I'm going to put all that together as part of my attempt to evaluate and give recommendations for the next director and a strategic plan that the board can consider. Any questions on that?
Michael, to take a half a step back, one of the questions that I would like to have an answer to, not today, but as part of one of your presentations on funding, I don't understand the source and use of funds for the CCBHB program. Is it additional money coming from Washington as manna from heaven that we have an opportunity to gather and partake of? Or has someone in Lansing said, well, we have this $2.4 billion worth of Medicaid money that we're now dispensing through capitated funding. Let's take some of that back and put it in this other silo and use it to create another program. If that's the case, my opinion might be, wait a second, they've taken something away. We need to get it back by considering this program.
Yes, the answer is kind of, and that will be part of the analysis. Indeed, it's that there's a federal component, a state component, and indeed, it does have an impact on our traditional Medicaid capitated rates, our big Medicaid contract. We're just not sure yet what that is. And so over the next several months, this will become clearer and clearer, especially since the budget that was just passed in the governor's office seems to suggest a movement in utilizing this model of care to increase our ability to provide behavioral health services in a different way. Well, what does that mean? So yes, we will answer that. There could be an impact to one funding stream based on another. I'm just not sure yet what that is, but that's one of the main objectives of me to find out when it relates to this. The other thing is if non-CMHs are allowed to become CCBHC organizations, then it could have a real negative impact on the current CMH in that county, because funds would go to another organization, say like, I don't know, Hope Network decides to build one, or Cherry Health, or whoever, right? If that happens, then they would be almost like a CMH lookalike, as far as I'm concerned, on a lot of these services. And I don't know what the intention is, but gee, I don't think the idea from the federal government and the people at the state was to develop CCBHCs to replace CMHs. But guess what? Be careful. So I'm a little paranoid when it comes to that stuff. So I need to check my paranoia and do some due diligence with my other side of my brain. And I will do that to answer that question comprehensively. Because we need to know. Because we've already engaged in it. Did that help? Or was that too long-winded of a, I'll get back to you?
Well, there's a rationale, excuse me, for having a community mental health program, because the needs of our community are going to be different than other communities throughout the
Right.
state and throughout the nation, quite
Yes.
frankly.
It is
So-
clear that in the mental health code that the state must have community mental health organizations. And it's defined very specifically who can be that. We can be that. We're called a CMHSP, Community Mental Health Service Provider. And it's defined by only things like a board, a county board. There's 3 different versions of them, and they're required by law. And so anything that threatens that, really, there'll be a challenge to who gets to deliver public mental health services. Now, I'm all for choice. I'm all for choice at the consumer level and resident level. I want to make sure there is as many choices as we can have of who delivers the service and how we do it. However, if you defund the system that enforces choice, there's no choice. You just say, well, they used to be able to do it. Now these people do it. And then advocates and families have to figure out how to navigate 17,000 systems when this one's already hard enough to figure out. So that's why I want to do and have open meetings for the public to attend with the board. Those that can make it, those that don't, we'll record them. They're like, here's the Medicaid contract. Here's how much is in it. Here's what we're supposed to do. Here's how we're currently doing that in Ottawa. Understand it? You go, kind of, but yeah. Here's our general fund contract. It's $4 million. Here's what it's supposed to do. Here's the obligated services for it. Here's why we'll say in some finance meetings, well, we moved some money from general fund to help with Medicaid and Medicaid. I mean, it drives Amy nuts. We're like moving stuff around all the time. But can we do it? When can we do that? What is the community owed with that money? And it's just been a long time since we've opened it up and really gone through it. But we have enough new board members and a new interim director that needs to get back to basics and understanding what are we obligated to do and how we're doing it.
It'd be easier just to learn a little bit here, a little bit there, and then eventually figure out what is more important, and then figuring out where it needs to be put in first before you do the others.
I think you do both. You do a little bit here, a little
Yes,
bit here,
Because
and
if
then
you
pick.
learn it at once, your brain can't actually process it everything at once.
That's correct.
So
be-
if you just put knowledge and doing it in one way and not explaining why, people are not going to understand
Yes.
why.
That's an excellent point, and we will take that under advisement and how to do this process. So can I call on you to help me? When in doubt, I'm going to recruit you. I'd be honored to have you help me look at the model of how I intend to do this and get your feedback.
Because if you put more than one brain together, then you can easily figure it out faster than.
That you got that right. So I can have your help? Yes, great. Excellent.
Dr. Bashirs, I
Yeah.
just want to comment. I am one of those new people, and I cannot thank you enough for your style of leadership. Just in this short amount of time, I have learned more than I've learned in the last 6 months. And I think that you're educational, informative, you're transparent, and I think that's extremely important, not just for us, but for the public. And I cannot thank you enough. This is like a breath of fresh air. Thank you.
So the other things that I'm focusing on next month, what's our contract approval process and what information do we have? What's our board structure? And I'm saying the need for subcommittees. Review of the CCBHC program and strategic plan. Recipient Rights Department and incident report tracking. I was informed yesterday, or not yesterday, everything feels like yesterday, that part of our major recipient rights training, we work with Network 180, the Kent County CMH board, to help us with the training through the region on training everybody, all of our providers on recipient rights. They have a portion. They've informed us that they're no longer offering that to anybody outside their county. That means with the recipient rights department of one, emphasis on purpose, I got to figure out a training mechanism within our training unit at CMH, and Anna will help me with that, and recommendations to assist in the appropriate recipient rights level of staffing that we need to meet our obligations. As you're aware, and I did this and it's my fault, 11 or 12 years ago, I made the recipient rights committee kind of like the full board. And you kind of go, all right, we're now doing the recipient rights committee and then now the board. That was an attempt back then to have all the board involved. However, like I just mentioned, it does not allow you to have a drill down separate committee with you and other members of the community and staff to drill down the information and then present it to the full board. So I'll be looking at that model and how we track incident reports. I've been looking at that. What's the threshold when somebody's like, oh, that's a health and safety violation that I don't care if the guardian or the consumer wants to be there. That's too egregious for us to remain in contract. We need to develop those thresholds. But try to do that in a full board situation once a month on the agenda. We could spend 4 hours doing that. So I'm coming up with a methodology for your consideration. One of the things in my director decision-making principles is if I deem something an emergency, I'm going to say I want to take action before the permanent director is assigned. The recipient rights department and our staffing level, I'm declaring we need to do that in because I don't believe we have the capability to manage that with one FTE for the entire county. So I'll be putting forward a request on that and then working with the county to address that issue. I've deemed it an emergency is what I'm saying. I'm almost done, I promise. An event that happened through the CMH, through our internal county, is that our CMH employees, besides the leadership group, have unionized. There has been a union contract ratified for CMH employees besides the leadership team. I will be presenting next month an impact analysis of what that means to us. I believe there was a 2-year contract that still has to be approved, by the way, by the Ottawa County Commissioners. But it's been ratified by the union. It was a long process of long time to do. And it is a 2-year contract that has specific impacts to raises. So what I'm going to do is look at the impact of unionization to our current model of managing CMH and what that is, good, bad, and different, right? Unions are here. It's happened. And if passed by the Ottawa County Commissioners, that will be a component. I've had many experience in dealing with unions in the CMH. When I worked in Lansing for CEI, we had 4 labor contracts. I did it for 7 years. There is a way to use unionization in a positive way to ensure that the services and the rights of our residents and consumers are taken care of. So I'm not saying I'm anti-union or pro-union. What I'm saying is it's the obligation of this office, my office, to give you an impact analysis of unionization to our existing system. And I intend to do that.
Dr. Brashears, was
Yeah.
there any type of, for the employees, any type of, I don't know what you would even call it, a training or anything that talked about what that meant for us as a county, what the union, the specifics of that, everything? Were the employees let know?
It was the employee's choice to unionize, and and representatives have been an active component in developing a union contract for either a year or over a year, close to a year. So yes, through those mechanisms that you usually find through union negotiations. I don't believe us as a leadership group said, here's the impact of this, because it's almost like tampering. It'd be like, you better not do it because this means, do you know what this means now? Right? And I don't think that it's legal and ethical. So I believe it's a process that happens internally, but it is my obligation once it's approved, to say, here's what it means in a very neutral way. Now, the only reason why I bring it up to this board is that if I'm supposed to be 100% in control as an executive director of the CMH employees, I actually have zero control of wages and fringes and union negotiations. So the bulk of the budget I can influence, but I don't control. And so I need to, that's part of us being a county department that I need to keep you abreast of. Here's the consequences of that. Now, there are other CMH directors in the state that are saying, Dr. Brashears, that's awesome. You don't even have to worry about that. Somebody else is doing it and you just have to figure it out. But here's what I take seriously. All of the funding for salaries, fringes, and increases, 100% comes from the Medicaid and general fund budget and not the county general fund. So we pay this department with the money intended for the management and delivery of services to this community for all of the wages, and it's always been like that, even before unionization. But I keep an eye on that because if other bodies control how much of the Medicaid budget is going to be utilized to deal with labor cost, then this board has to be extremely involved in understanding the impact to the funding to the residents of this county for services. It's easy for somebody to say, you got a 7% increase if you don't have any money in the game. If you're not going to use county general funds to pay for county employees' salaries and benefits, then you better understand the impact of that to the recipients. The example of this is several years ago, CMH employees did not get an increase where every other county employee did because our Medicaid budget was such in despair. We called it the Hunger Games. There's like $7 million in cuts. Those county employees did not get an increase, I think for 2 years, where every other county employee did. How is that right? If I'm a county employee, is there salaries and fringes? I ask this as an interim, I can go for it. I can just tell you straight up. Is the CMH employees only a county employee when a Medicaid budget can sustain their raises? Or are they a county employee where the county has to put skin in the game to help with union negotiations that this board has no control over? I will be monitoring that. It's always been like that in our history here. There's nobody trying to, but what has happened is there's a one-to-one correlation between wages and fringes for CMH employees and the Medicaid budget. Wow, no other department in this county has to deal with that. That's why 95% of CMHs are not county departments. It's that simple. So if I'm a community member, it's like how much of the Medicaid budget meant for services and the administration of that is being negotiated outside of this board? I intend to answer that question. Not to say we should separate from the county or the counties do anything bad, but so that our eyes and county commissioners' eyes are wide open, that raises seem to be only dependent on what is in the Medicaid CMH budget for these county employees, and no other county department, none, zero, have to face that reality when it comes to fringes and benefits. So if I'm a CMH employee, am I only a county employee when the Medicaid budget can stand my raise, or is the county part of paying for fringes and benefits and taking the risk on that as well? I don't know the answer to that, but I intend to pose the question. Especially because we just negotiated a union contract. We owe these employees an explanation that their wages and fringes are not solely based on Medicaid dollars meant for services. And so if I would have been here through, and I know people tried, Anna tried, I know for a fact, to bring that point out over and over again in negotiations. And so this board needs to understand the one-to-one relationship between what's the funding for services and how we're paying for people to deliver them. And I will present information over the next couple of months on what this means. And hopefully we'll have an agreement where it's strong county government, strong CMH board, walking hand in hand and ensuring there's enough money to deliver the services to the people that they're entitled to. Entitled to. Medicaid is an entitlement. It's not based on funding levels. The more money I spend on delivering the service, the less I do for other arrangements like self-determination and individual things that families can do. The more I have tied up in directly operated services, the less options people have for other arrangements, which they're entitled to. So I'm intending to look at that very closely. I have a lot to work to do over the next 30 days, and that concludes my report pending any questions.
I have a question, a couple just questions or kind of next steps too. So when you provide this information to us about, what I'm curious about is the 95% of other CMHs, the other model, what their financial success looks like
Great.
by being independent of a county. And then could you also include in that too, how many do have unions?
Yes, I can do that.
Okay.
Many CMHs envy our model, by the way. I'm not saying that our model is a bad model.
Well,
But-
I'm not concluding. I'm just
Yeah, I know.
gathering
I'm just being
information.
clear because I'm on the record here and this will go viral. So, what I'm saying is we need an honest examination so everybody understands with their eyes open what all this means.
Right.
And that's what you ask. I'll include those data points and others that you might want.
And so we have right now a situation where it's like, okay, monies from our Medicaid budget that they go to wages and benefits, and now we have a union on board. That's, so that's a bucket of money. So
Right.
what we need to be looking at as a board is the other bucket
Yes.
that's left. And what do we do? How do we prioritize how we care for our
Yes.
community members?
And my argument is this board's fiscal responsibility with oversight of the county, but this board are statutorily required to manage those budgets. Not the county commissioners, believe it or not. They approve our overall budget because that's the rules in the mental health code. But this body is the one that has statutory responsibility of the Medicaid and general fund budget, not the Ottawa County commissioners above you in that level. They have an important role, but let's get it straight. It's this.
I look forward to learning kind of how we prioritize our statutory responsibilities for those entitled services.
Other questions? I'm sorry it was so long, but I'm new and I'm trying to provide information.
There's just, gonna kind of just speak from my heart right now. I think that's the only way I know how to talk. There's so much that you said right now. I don't even know how to formulate a question in my head.
Yeah, me too.
I don't even know what the right word is, frustrated, disappointed. How come none of us even knew that this unionization was happening? How did that happen? That someone didn't just let us know that that was going on? I don't get that. Maybe we're not supposed to know. We don't need to know. I don't know. I'm just, again, talking from my heart and it's so hard to, staff need raises, absolutely, without a doubt,
Absolutely.
hardworking. But we're working so hard to get Medicaid money to help people. So now we're going to take more Medicaid money to do that. And I'm thinking and talking out loud here. Sorry. I just don't even know how to formulate my questions and thoughts because it's so, wow.
Yeah, to me, the unionization strengthens our ability to provide directly operated services. We have to do it with our eyes wide open and understand the impact of that. The reason why, in my opinion, this is just my own personal opinion, not the opinion, that unionization happened was staff felt insecure in the whole system.
I just wish we would have known that.
I understand.
Because I don't know how, I know most of us have not been on this board for more than a year. I know just a year now. So all the stuff that happened before that, like, no idea.
Right.
We
So-
walked into all of that.
Right. And so now we're going to begin the process of understanding the impact with full participation and questions. And yeah, but I understand what you're saying.
Sorry for just, I don't know how to even formulate what I'm thinking and
No,
feeling.
I
So I
understand.
apologize.
I said an
for-
awful lot and I get pretty passionate about it.
And I appreciate your passion. I wish I could passionately tell you what I'm thinking, but I don't even know how to say it because it's so like, wow. Sorry, gang.
Sylvia?
And I would just say too, like, for me coming from the other side where I have worked with, within a system, of very, low pay as a social worker, I understand the turnover that can happen in these systems and that when you're having turnover from staff burnout, and the burdens that staff are carrying, that it doesn't benefit our, our clients either if we're rolling through
Absolutely.
staff. And so I think it is a balance of both things. It's really important to pay our staff so their lives can be stable, and so they're not stressed personally. And so I appreciate that you're going to do an evaluation because I don't think it's necessarily, a bad thing. We just need this whole system to be stabilized. So we do need to understand the ramifications, the good and the bad, and how do we move forward to make this work best for the people we're serving and for staff. So I appreciate that you're going to do an analysis.
Christian?
So, as in regards to the union, I do know that, and I'm trying to remember when, but I do know that Lynn had mentioned that in her director's reports in passing, because at the end of the day, it is an ongoing thing that we really don't have a lot of input in as a board because that's not our purview. This has been a lot to kind of like get into, and I appreciate your concerns and kind of the things you're bringing up. I just, just to kind of like a point of clarity as you've gone around and like discussed and looked and talked and like, done deep dives with the staff, as far as like, these concerns fiscally, programmatically, at every other level, we are still fulfilling at every level
Correct.
our obligations
Correct.
to be, okay.
Yeah,
That's
there's
all right.
nothing I've discovered to say we're not meeting our obligations.
all right. So okay, perfect.
And one thing I would like to have worked on or like a recommendation about, because hearing that story about employees being kind of left behind for 2 years, is there something, come up with some sort of plan or a strategy that doesn't happen again? Is that
Correct.
possible? Because I know our general fund, from the county, it's like the amount that we give to CMH is pretty low. But I mean, if that's something that we can do as a board, I know that we do want to make sure that our employees are well cared for.
Yes.
And it seems very odd that we would carve out a certain group just because of the funding sources
Correct.
and not, have equal pay and pay and benefit increase.
Yeah, absolutely. We will look at that.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Is it based like, when you said their pay, some were raising and some were not, was it based on like how many clients and like how much more work they had to do versus the other?
It was not. It was solely based on which bucket of money was going to be able to pay for increases. And if it wasn't enough in that one bucket of money, no other buckets of money were considered. So it wasn't based on productivity or things like you're suggesting, which are very good measures to look at that. It was solely based on the inability for the Medicaid budget we have to pay for the salaries increases. And that's my point.
My other concern is if they get a cut, it's more like they're trying to defend and might have to get another job because they can't afford or feed their family.
And that's what happened.
Yeah.
Hence unionization.
That's why they have unions. for
Yeah.
that reason.
I mean, if you're not, if your salaries are linked to one funding source and that funding source doesn't have in the money and everybody else in the county gets a raise, you start going, huh, gee, maybe I should work somewhere else if it's dependent on this Medicaid budget that the state controls. It seems to change all the time. And that's exactly what happened. We lost people. We lost people.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm struggling with, just to not know that that comes from, the funding source was Medicaid.
Right,
That's what I'm just
exactly.
in awe of.
And so we'll do an analysis, we'll present the information, but to Chris' points, there's nothing going on right now that says we're not meeting our obligations. We're meeting our obligations in spite of all of this. It's quite remarkable, actually.
You want to retain and recruit
Yeah.
good staff too.
Yeah,
so-
in spite of all this, the staff and everybody's meeting their obligations, as far as I can tell so far, in spite of all the challenges. And I find that extremely remarkable and honored to work with people that are doing that. I haven't found any area where I'm going, oh my God, there's just nothing going on here. Nothing yet. And I don't think I'm going to, but we have let things atrophy in key components of the organization for oversight, contract compliance, based on a necessity due to the available funding to have positions. And, you know, if you got one compliance officer, one for all of the services, with people helping, but one, that's not adequate for a managed care contract for thousands of people and millions of dollars. We have one.
Just one dedicated employee.
Yeah, but there's
sole
support around them,
focus, Right.
but one person, Kristen, and thank God she works here. Because I look at her, oh my God, you all right today? You know, she's a wonderful individual, our compliance officer, but there's only really the support around her, clerical support and some other staff, but you need somebody with the level of decision-making and authority more than one FTE to address that. All right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And moving on, we have a presentation today from our Parents Advisory Work Group, which consisted of Rosalie Austin, Steve Johnson, and Sue Stone. And they're going to present or give us their presentation on self-determination that they presented. No, you're not going to? You're not going to talk to us about it? You're shaking your head. Come on up here. You presented in Baltimore. Was it in March? Yeah. Please come forward and share with the board. You can, yeah,
If it's possible.
perfect. Okay, maybe what we can do is put this into the board packet.
Yeah,
Yep, perfect.
we're trying to load it
So-
up right now too.
Wonderful. Like,
Board packet was our report.
Thank you.
will be the spokesperson.
Hi, my name's Steve Johnson. I have a 36-year-old with cerebral palsy and autism. So I'm a parent advocate.
Steve, could you get closer to the mic?
Oh, okay.
I know our AV today is not ideal.
I've never been accused of being quiet, but Steve Johnson. My son is a quadriplegic, so he has some unique needs, and that's why I have a great interest in working with community mental health on this. There's more people on the parent advisory committee, but we're the three amigos. We went to the national conference in Baltimore and gained a lot from that. And one is going to talk about that. I think Rosalie does. First of all, I'm talking about how the committee formed and why. We appreciate having a seat at the table. There's an old saying that if you don't have an invitation or a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu. And I think that many times parents have felt like maybe they were entree because things weren't really going their way. Having a seat at the table is kind of like the autism statement that nothing about me without me. It's important to consider how those policies carry out and how people are receiving benefits. So in our presentation, we're outlining the reasons of CMH wanted to start this and the PASS as partners advancing self-directed services. Tired of acronyms, but we're the PASS team, yeah. It started out, there were like 21 people on this, represented from different areas, from Lansing and from here, and CMH staff and parents. And for the most part, it kind of boiled down to not everybody participated as much as we had hoped, but still, we got through it. There were three things. Parent skepticism, yeah. I don't think it was the best relationship that parents maybe had with CMH at that time, because we all have stories that were rather serious to us. And I think it was a matter of reaching out. And we appreciate that because one of the goals was to build trust. And we came a long way. I think we're about ready to roast the marshmallows around the fire and sing Kumbaya. Not quite, we're cautiously optimistic on that. We met as a PASS committee for, I guess it was 9 months or 8 months. Sometimes it felt like 2 years, but yeah, we met and went through a lot of things. A lot of that was kind of like team building or try to understand somebody else's point of view, be open, build a little bit of trust, because that's where the good work comes from. So we met for 2 hours about every month. And then we had 3 committees in that. One was focusing on the budgeting process for the individual with self-directed services, also fidelity. And then the booklet you referenced, you had up there, that's important to look at. And I think you do have this in your package too. That's what we're covering basically today, because we don't have time to go over every single item on that. So those committees also met just about every month. So we put quite a bit of time into this over that 8 or 9 month period. And Jan Lampman facilitated the team building exercises. It was kind of fun to be discussing things with build bridges and get us to know each other better. And I think that happened. Also, Laura Demuse gave a presentation on the progress of the electronic visit verification, EVV. My mind keeps seeing EW there with TV.
Yeah, right.
Okay. We verified employer of record data sheets, storage responsibilities. We did a lot more than I anticipated we would be doing through this process, but it was building upon the faith and good faith we had in each other and what our intentions were. Also, the budget committee worked on improving what's called the MIR, the Medicaid allocation report. That's what each person with self-directed services gets a budget. They get to see what the progress is. And I hope we'll get back to that at some other meeting and kind of give you an idea how self-directed services work. So the book is great for people to take a look at. The one in your part of the process of putting it together was creating that book. And then also there's a map in there, which is you need a magnifying glass at that size to read. But conceptually, a lot of us are visual thinkers, and I don't like reading as much as I like looking at a map. You go to a mall and it says you are here. If you want that store, you go down this way. I think it's great that there's a map. People can see the progress that way. And then the fidelity is still being worked on by the Parent Advisory Committee. Fidelity, basically, how do we keep this true to its initial intent and make sure everybody is doing the right job and basically the people that are served by community mental health and are being served the best possible way. And then Sue? Rosalie, okay.
Rosalie Austin, City of Holland. It's just a quick recap of the work we've done with the committee. And we went to the Applied Self-Direction Conference in Baltimore, Maryland. So there was people all across the nation that went, and it was very, very interesting and informative to meet other people and what's happening in their localities and how they manage self-direction, promote, include, and teach people how to do it in comparison to basically just starting out when Self-D has been around for 24 years. But we learned about brokers, independent sports brokers. Some states use agencies for brokers, which can help a family self-direct. It's more, can be another role that helps supports coordinators to manage your budget, recruit, retain, train your workers. FMSs, there's so many financial management services. We have 3 that we contract with, but I'm amazed at how many there are. And we learned about best practices, what other states are doing. And ANCAPS is the National Center on Advancing Person-Centered Practices and Systems, and that's a whole person-centeredness is the basis of our plans, the whole system really, and there's so much to learn about that also. And of course, the direct care worker shortage. Everyone is competing for the same workers. And we met different state administrators participated there, people from Arkansas. It was really eye-opening. But the networking experience was invaluable, just meeting people all over the country. And it was very, very enlightening. And the difference is, again, how local control makes that difference. And I believe in local control, that what we can do, there's so many possibilities with self-direction that people aren't aware of, that it's an option for your loved one's best life. And there's a lot in Michigan, we don't really utilize the broker position. So we're kind of like the blind leading the blind to utilize that and bring that to help families. And the transparency, it's hard to find the information on this, and our purpose was to kind of have this all spelled out, how to do it, where to do it, whose role, who's responsible for what, so that it's smooth instead of how do I do this, who do I ask, and time consuming to get from access to actual implementation, make that smoother. And then we have a tip of the iceberg.
I saw that.
That there's just so much that goes on behind the scenes. And it's not public comment yet though, but my practices has 24/7 recipient rights training available for free.
Did you say free?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
My practices 24/7. State approved. And I'm rambling, and we want to work on the sustainability and fidelity to the model, improve it for the families that do self-direction. And
Thank you.
Sue Stone. member that's wonderful, Teresa. We have two wonderful additions to the committee as well. We have a lot of work ahead of us, as you can see by the tip of the iceberg. And the two new members will be instrumental in helping us get the rest of that work done. Our committee, called Committee Work Group, as Tim said, we appreciate, having a table, a seat at the table, because it's really important for the system to understand where the parents come from, what they have to say, and a lot of it is value add because we're the ones that are down in the trenches, understanding how to make that daughters, and sometimes the upper echelon doesn't have that opportunity to do so. So we made many changes, as we'll see in our report. There's an accomplishment list and then a recommendation list of some of the things that we have done. We've made several changes. There was actually 7 of them to the SD policy, and we're still waiting final approval on those changes. One of the biggest ones was in the contract, the SD contract, self-determination contract, that's between the employer of record, which is the individual, and CMH. They kept mentioning medical necessity. And the actual Medicaid term is medical necessity criteria, which encompasses 4 criteria, one which deals with individuals who have IDD. So we changed that terminology on the SD policy as well as the SD contract. And we met monthly for 2 hours. We meet monthly for 2 hours. Our primary focus initially was to create that book, which is an education about SD for families. It's a real simple process when you think about it. We all live self-directed lives. How simple is that? Unfortunately, when we take that concept and put it into the system, it gets very complicated. You don't know who's doing what, why they're doing it, where you should go. And so that was the purpose of the book. It was just an introduction along with the map, which is much easier to read in the book, to help people go through the whole system and understand, and it gives them ability to ask intelligent questions rather than going, do you have any questions? And they look at you, oh, I don't know, because you don't know what you know. And so the biggest thing, like I say, is we wanted to not only educate parents, but educate the system. We needed a cultural change. Things had been, as the old saying, we've done it this way for 50 years, why change? It's working. Well, we see that it needs to change. The federal government has made significant changes under the final rule. And so the state has struggled to come in compliance under some of those rules. It's been a long, laborious process. Like Rosalie mentioned, SD's been around for 24 years. It was initially supposed to be rolled out in Michigan in 1998, and here we are today. So we're kind of an active group interested in pursuing better means of delivering services, making the system understand how we don't want to be a threat to the system. We want to collaborate with the system, work with them to not only educate them, but hear our voice as well as us understanding how the system works. As Dr. Bashir just gave you, it's a very, very complicated system, very difficult for a parent to understand how that system works. What else? I can go into all of these, but everything is pretty self-explanatory in the report. And we just want to thank you for the opportunity to present our work. I hope you have questions after reading it. We're open. And also we want to continue on a collaborative basis with CMH. Our goal is to, because of complications in the state, we can't change state policy easily. That doesn't happen overnight. So we decided that we're going to make CMH Ottawa County the best model for the rest of the state, and that's what it'll open some eyes. And so there's several, like I say, the iceberg shows you many of the things that we still are working on. And we feel we've made a positive impact on the education, implementation, acceptance, and fidelity of self-determination and self-directed services at Ottawa County CMH. Any questions?
Gotta say, I love that goal statement, to make CMH of Ottawa County best practice model for self-determination. I look forward to a partnership in order to do that. Are there questions?
Yeah, I have a question. How many people in Ottawa County use self-directed?
Me either, but I will.
You can find that out. 100?
Approximately 8,000 in the state and only 1.5 million in the nation. It's a well-kept secret. It's an option, a service delivery option that people aren't educated and informed about. The obligation to do. And it's not new, but we need to get the processes and policies and educate and inform. And I like how Sue says too, that Ottawa County can be a leader in the state for that. Voices and sky's the limit, so many possibilities to help your relations the best.
And comment, we want to acknowledge that because she is the one that took the information response committee and decided to actually create a work group. Invite the three of us to be part of that work group, which opened the door communication. It invited us, and if it hadn't been heard, because a lot of the CMHs went, I shouldn't say a lot. There are CMHs that went to the cost project, and after it was over and done, they went back to the old place. So CMH Ottawa County, thanks to Beth Durkee, has taken that next step in creating a role model for this.
Standing. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. About this conflict access and planning rule the Department of Health and Services has rolled out. I'm trying to wrap my arms around it and understand what I perceive as being a conflict between those who think the current plan as proposed is faulty and others on the self-D side think that it can actually be beneficial. And I'm trying to understand, I was wondering if you could touch on that, how that current plan may affect self-determination, both positively and negatively.
What the state, I feel the state is struggling with is the fact that they have to create a conflict-free policy for mental health. However, you run into significant problems when you try to separate conflict-free mental health services and IDD. That's almost impossible to do. I don't know how the state is going to resolve that because mental health services require professionals to direct the program in terms of what treatment will be like, what the therapy will be like, what medication protocols will be. Under IDD, it's totally different. It doesn't require the degree of medical knowledge in order to provide service to an individual diagnosis. And so if you have a system that's funding and says what we don't need, and that's that brings a great JAMLAT and presented for our group discussion in the POS project, what you need and what you want. We all had to define what we need and what we want, totally different. You know, what you perceive as what I need and what I need are two different, you interpret it as want versus the need. And so that was a great discussion. And I think that's what the system comes into play here is the system sees what wants and needs differently than the individual or the individual's family. And that's where this conflict is coming in. And I think it's
I don't know how the state's going to resolve it because it's going to be a real challenge. And it's the same thing I was saying. The committee, I feel, in another state, we had a human rights committee just for IUD. We oversaw rights restrictions, medications, abuse, neglect. We usually looked at about 80 reports a month. And there was about 10 of us on the committee, ranging from a psychologist, from the case managers, family, director of the ARC, social worker. So it was very, autonomous committee that looked at an individual, make sure that their rights were not violated, that they were treated fairly. Here, because we're under the mental health system, we don't have what I consider human rights evaluation. That doesn't exist. And again, looking at mental health versus IDD, you can't look at those two service models and say, we put a blanket over and say, we're going to treat everyone the same. So that's my.
Yeah, and I think our next speaker is going to help with that too.
Yeah, that's that whole person-centered
Yeah.
care, by our care plan, but yet, we want to put it in a structure of some sort, and that's challenging.
So anyway, you'll see that that's one of our bullet points on the iceberg. That's one.
I see it. You've got a lot of work right here, definitely. Are there any further?
I
Sorry.
feel conflict-free access and planning is already done with self-directed services.
Correct.
You're aware of your options, that you can use an independent facilitator, you can use independent sports coordination, you can use and choose what you need, and basically the budget, CMH approves the budget. So it is already being done, but how to transfer that to the other populations, there is.
That's. Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you so much for
Thank
your
you.
volunteerism, your support.
Nice.
All right, and next up is a presentation. I'm sorry, we just did that. I apologize. Old business, we don't have it. New business is a presentation for conflict-free access and planning. Dr. Bashirs, if you'd like
So
to
we
introduce the
have
guest.
Alan Bolter here from the association. He's the associate director. And it's under new business because at one point I hypothesized that maybe this board would pass a resolution opposing the state's methodology and ruling out conflict-free. And as our last speakers eloquently said, I couldn't say it any better. It really is the impact to the mental health side of the issue that's making this difficult. And so I thought I'd have Alan come from the association because I've been sending you all this stuff from them. And I said, let's get them here and present kind of a view on this and let people ask questions. And then you can entertain, if you so choose, to pass a resolution opposing MDHHS's methodology in rolling out conflict-free and planning, if you so choose. It's not something that you have to do. But Alan, if you could educate us to this issue, I'd appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. As Dr. Bashir said, my name is Alan Bolter. I'm the Associate Director for the CMH Association of Michigan. We are the entity that represents all of Michigan's public mental health system in Lansing. Now, I have to say, I do live in neighboring Kent County, so appreciate the short drive over this morning. But my role at the CMH Association, I do all of our legislative advocacy, lobbying, what have you. I get to work with the folks in the state capitol on a daily basis, whether that's a good or bad role. That's what I do. So it's certainly a ever-changing environment over there. And I have to say, it's a tough act to follow with the last group that was up here, but I will do my best. I did send over some documents. So the one that you have pulled up on the screen, one of the things that I try to do through our association is put together infographics that try to describe, highlight, outline very complicated issues in some kind of a digestible form for folks that don't deal with this on a daily basis. So this is kind of our attempt at making conflict-free access and planning what the heck it is in some kind of a easy to understand one-page document, if you will. So essentially, conflict-free access and planning, what is it? It is a 2014 federal regulation which attempts to minimize conflict of interest for those individuals receiving home and community-based services. And one of the other documents I sent over outlines, I think there are 11 services. It's kind of the chart that shows there are 11 services that kind of fall under, well, what the heck is our home and community-based services? There are 11 essential services that fall under that. So the one chart kind of goes through what exactly those are. But do agree with Dr. Bashir's that, we as an association, our members across the state, certainly support the effort of conflict-free access and planning, where we want to limit the conflict that or the perceived conflicts out there with people receiving these services. What the federal government has said is they see the best way to eliminate the perceived conflict with individuals receiving these particular services would be to separate out a couple of key functions. One would be the access planning, plan development of these services from the actual entities that provide the services themselves. So they believe that there should be some kind of a clear separation where if you are the entity that provides services, you absolutely cannot be the entity that does the planning, the access, the plan of service for individuals receiving there. There has to be some kind of a clear, defining definition there. Now, we have been involved in, I guess I would describe it as spirited dialogue with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services over the implementation of this federal regulation. Now, again, this is something that's been in place for 10 years. We've been going back and forth for probably the last 2.5 years on how best to implement this particular rule in how it actually fits here in the state of Michigan. Again, as Dr. Bashir has mentioned, we're very unique here in Michigan, where we are a public system. We are a county-based mental health system where it was in the Michigan Constitution that we shall provide mental health services. The state of Michigan has then given that responsibility to local counties, counties that either have county boards of mental health, which you have here in Ottawa County, or they develop a separate county authority, which they have in Kent County. Regardless, the state has given that responsibility to counties. We are a public system. We are our entities, you as Ottawa County CMH, you don't take a profit off the money that you receive from this, where in many other states, they are either not-for-profit entities or they are much more a provider-based model where the mental health services provided in those communities are not done by governmental entities. They are done by not-for-profit providers or for-profit providers. Anytime you have a federal, state, local regulation, policy, whatever, that probably means that something inappropriate happened at some point. So now we have a rule put in place to make sure that doesn't happen again. I think that's kind of the evolution of where this came from. Also here in Michigan, we are a managed care state where the amount of money that you get here at Ottawa CMH, you get a pot of money for all the people here in your county. You do not get money for a fee-for-service model where every time you provide a service, you get a dollar amount for that. You get one lump sum to serve all the people. So I think our financing model here is slightly different as well. So those are some of the arguments we tried to use with the state as they put together this implementation. Also, I would point out Chapter 8 of the Mental Health Code really outlines protections for individuals as far as that CMH is required to provide services regardless if they have the ability to pay, that they cannot charge anymore. There's a whole host of protections in there for individuals as far around the actual paying, affordability, things of that nature. So we have some already built-in protections there. It is, again, it's been very clear that through CMS, which is the federal government, and the state of Michigan, that they have indicated there has to be an absolute separation here. The way our entities here in Michigan were built through the mental health code, our CMHs provide a multiple of functions where they do the access and planning. They also provide services. I mean, they do a whole host of things as allowed and defined in the mental health code. Now with this new regulation, again, the federal government, the state have said, you have to separate out that. You can no longer do both of those. I think, again, we've been in a lot of dialogue with the state on this. I think we're working through this process. But one of our concerns with the plan that the state did send the federal government of how they go about, meeting this requirement, we believe they actually go above and beyond the federal requirements on conflict-free access and planning. And I think in two distinct ways. And again, I think one of the issues is anytime you have a separation where at one point things were done in one entity, all of this was done under one roof, you separate it out, that creates layers. That creates, increased costs, that increased staffing burden, that increases, confusion for individuals on where to get services. That decreases the amount of money available for services. So the two areas, I think they go above and beyond the federal requirements. On the access planning side of things, the state, I believe, is saying we want to further separate out assessment from access and planning and developing a plan of service for individuals. We want to further separate that out and have that done at a different location. Then on the other side of things, as far as the authorization of the dollars, that has been done through the mental health code here at the CMH. We want to pull that authorization and that money out of the CMH system and move that to the regional entity or the PIHP system. So again, we are now adding layers on top of an already very complicated system. And, we believe that goes above and beyond the federal guidance. And again, anytime you add different layers, so now in the past, if individuals wanted to receive services, they go to Ottawa CMH, they have their plan of service developed, they do their access, they do their intake. If you provide services here, the services are provided here. Under this new proposed plan, you now have to go one place to determine eligibility, then you have to go someplace else to have your plan of service developed, then you have to go someplace else to receive your services. It makes very little sense. I mean, I understand that we have to comply with the federal regulations out there, but we do not want to add additional barriers for people trying to receive services, trying to access services. This is going to cost more money. And anytime you have more hands involved, it adds costs, which there's no additional money in the budget to make up, this difference, which, as Dr. Brazier pointed out, you have kind of a set pot of money here. You increase costs someplace, it's going to be coming out of someplace else. So it's been an extremely frustrating process that we've been undergoing the last couple of years. One of the other things that we are asking the State Department would be, if you're going to comply with this, move forward with this, we need to have some kind of a long runway, at least to implement this. This is not something that can be done overnight. We have heard that, the implementation date they were shooting for is October 1. That seems relatively impossible to do that. If you are, and many of our CMHs do provide, they do both of these functions. They do the access and planning, and they provide services. Is going to take time. That means they're literally going to have to bring in other outside entities to do one of those two functions. That's going to take time. Also, frankly, what it means is there's going to be a loss of staff. I mean, they are going to either have to reallocate staff to another area, or my fear is that means that they're probably going to have to lay off staff. because they are no longer able to provide both of those functions. So, and I think lastly, the other fear that we have would be, we spent the last 2+ years in Lansing fighting a privatization fight where there were some legislation that was introduced that attempted to take the financial management, so control of the dollars, and the oversight and give it to private insurance companies versus our public system. We were able to defeat that last year. That did not move forward. One of the areas that made it difficult to actually turn the management function over to the insurance companies is our system is fairly complicated. A lot of the functions that a managed care entity they would do is done at our local CMH level. So it was a way where the insurers couldn't really figure out how to get at some of this. This proposal essentially takes some of that managed care, some of that tangled stuff that we do, takes it out of the CMH system, moves it over to the managed care entity. So, we will have a different administration in Lansing in 2 years. Governor Whitmer's not able to run again, as you know. We're going to have a new administration. What's to say that new administration, when they come in January 2027, wouldn't say, well, I really don't like this publicly run system. I want to hand this over to the insurance companies. Well, the state's already kind of done some of that work of untangling some of this stuff, plopped it over there. And I just think it makes it far easier to privatize the system in the future. So that's kind of high level of where we're at, what it does, some of our concerns. Happy to answer questions that folks may have. I mean, if you have other Lansing-based questions, fire away too. Happy to answer those.
Before you do that, I'll just add 2 points and then open it up, right? So here's the impact to us. This gets implemented the way the state wants. All of our directly operated people that I was talking about, the union, all that stuff, we have to choose between, are we going to do access and all of our access components or access department, or be a provider? We would have to make a choice, provider or MCO. If they move all these functions to the Lakeshore Regional Entity, which is our kind of managed care person, then we're essentially just a provider, period, like any other provider. So that's the impact here. It forces us to not have an access department anymore. It forces us to not be in the part of treatment planning through the person-centered planning process anymore. So on the MI side, the clinician that's developing the person-centered plan / treatment plan is not the same person that can deliver the service. And as a clinical psychologist, that'd be like me in my private practice, having Amanda come in, doing an assessment, and she would be fine, by the way, and me going, sorry, I can't provide the treatment, even though I just assessed what you needed. And that's what our first group was saying. On the DD side, we have some of that built in already. On the MI side, it's a fundamental threat to clinical best practice. So I just add those 2 components and then any question.
And I think to further complicate this for Ottawa CMH would be, you're a CCBHC. Under those 11 HCBS services, 4 of those fall under a CCBHC requirement. Under CCBHC requirements, one of the requirements is you have to do both the access and planning and provide the services. You cannot separate those out. So for 4 out of the 11, you're required to do all of that. But for the others, you now are going to have a different system to manage that. And that is one of the frustrations out there, as well as, we have CCBHC. You also have, on the kids-based side, the state is implementing a new kids assessment tool, Michigan's. And then also there are health homes out there. You have these different entities that are working within the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services that aren't necessarily working or talking together, that have different requirements, different regulations, none of which line up with the conflict-free access and planning, which is causing tremendous amounts of confusion, angst. You fill in the adjective out there. It's quite a problem. So with that, happy to.
Questions?
I have a question.
Rockman?
And there's a lot of discussion about various CMHs sending out to a resolution to oppose the current plan. And maybe I've missed it, but I haven't seen the suggested alternatives. So I have a clear understanding of the roadmap we like to follow and go down. Are there alternatives that have been proposed?
So, so in the document that you have pulled up on the back side, we kind of outline, not necessarily an alternative, but, a suggestion on how best to meet the regulations. So essentially, and for all intents and purposes, if someone comes in out of a CMH, you have zero clue if they're eligible for home and community-based services or not. You have to do the assessment. You have to go through that whole intake process. Once you identify, yes, Alan Bolter, you are eligible for these set of service arrays, what we're proposing would be then you as the intake entity would then have to offer that individual, well, here are the other providers in the county that would be able to provide those services. If there are no other providers, then you as the entity could provide the services, but in the meantime, you need to be, trying to seek to bring in providers to provide those services. That way, I mean, we think it's fairly clear there's going to have to be some kind of a separation. I don't think there's really any plausible way around that unless there are truly, if you are in a frontier area where there are no other providers, then you are the provider that does the whole thing, and then you have to set up some internal firewalls. I think that's kind of the process that we've outlined as best to comply with.
Yeah, it's choice of provider after intake. So you after your intake and you're found eligible for a service, before that clinical assessment happens, you can get that clinical assessment and our team here, or here are the other choices within our network here at Ottawa County to have choice of provider. Choice has always been part of the system, but in a lot of areas, the CMH is the only entity in the whole county that provides the services. You go up to Manistee or Benzie, you go up to those counties, there's like no other people up there providing it. So what we would do is the recommended process to ensure that we have robust options for alternative providers besides our directly operated system. And then they would take it from there. If I'm understanding what you're saying.
Yeah, no, and the tough part is, having a new entity come in some parts of the state, we're not talking about a high volume of individuals. So from a business perspective, would you really set up, a business in certain parts of the state where you're just not going to have a high enough volume to make it work. So it's, I mean, as Dr. Bashir said, I mean, it's really a tricky situation.
Well, it feels like it's complete restructuring the mental health delivery system, quite frankly.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, and I appreciate, I'm trying to figure out how we, split the baby, so to speak, because what's happening with self-determination, I mean, that's fantastic and it takes care of itself, but that's with family members who actually are there to help support.
Correct.
So there's a population of people that don't have that family support plus MI, and I've worked in the emergent setting for MI, and I can't even imagine, compliance being a huge issue too for care, having to then, do an assessment and plan and then redirect them somewhere into the community and hope and pray they get there. Yeah, so I'm really it feels like we could have solved this with like a hotline and an auditing process rather than, this complete restructuring as from the federal government.
Yeah, I mean, it is very counterintuitive to the way people want to receive care. I mean, the CCBHC model is intended to be a one-stop shop model where you come in and you get all of your care, you get physical health care, you get mental health care. It's you go to one place. I mean, there's no wrong door. Here, I mean, you've got multiple wrong doors.
And I just see a real potential for delay in care and
Yes,
kind of
and
crisis situation.
Yeah, delay is dangerous.
How do we keep managing, like with choice being, I think, the fundamental, word here, so we maintain choice for self-directed care, but then not everybody kind of falls into that, particular category or, the right treatment plan for MI or those who aren't attached to support.
Yeah, so this is why I was saying we can support conflict-free philosophical concepts. To me, I have a hard time supporting the state's methodology to get there
Yeah.
because what it does is destabilize the system, cause delay, and delay is dangerous. And so you separate from a clinical process, the assessment process and the treatment process. And that's difficult in highly clinical situations with complex mental health needs. So that's why this is like, you're serious, but my hunch is this is the path to privatization.
Privatization, that's what
If
I
you
was
move the
thinking,
managed care
yeah.
functions away from the public system,
Mhm.
you can go, guess what? Blue Cross can do it now. All right, you think it's complicated for the community now? Try figuring out which health plan's managing the assessment process. There's 5 in this county. So which one do you go to? And insurance changes all the time. So it's a loser for the resident, this implementation process.
It doesn't build efficiencies and it's not cost effective. I mean, even to just the rollout of this doesn't make it cost effective.
It feels like, in my opinion, when you were saying it, it feels like it should just be in one building. Because then
Ease of access.
it's like, you know where to go. You shouldn't be going to this place just to figure out longer. And then them calling you of like, why weren't you there? And they're like, I can't get there because I don't have a ride or something like that.
Right.
Or like it takes forever them to assess it when they can be like, I have this, they can analyze it in like a week or so because there's so many people, and then they can be like, this is what's going on. Instead of going to multiple buildings and different phone calls, because sometimes people don't answer because they don't know who it is.
Is that right? Delay is dangerous.
Delay is dangerous. Are there any other questions or I made bold statements?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, please.
So, this came rolling into MDHS, and it's obvious. I mean, CCBHC and all of these systems were not created in a vacuum. There's communication. They are in the unfortunate position of having to try and make this thing work because they have people they're beholden to. Is this seriously the best they can do, or do you feel that there is wiggle room on this? I mean, it's easy to disparage the Fed, but it's like our own state DHHS is the one, unfortunately, that has to try and make this work. And have they been putting forth, has it been a good fourth discussion, or are they just up against the wall on some
I mean,
things?
that I don't know. And I think, part of it, from talking to, folks that deal with CMS and the federal government on a daily basis, Medicaid is a federal state shared program. I think for the most part, when states go to the federal government, they want to be as cooperative as possible, talking about Medicaid waivers, how do we do things outside the box, because they want to keep that partnership going. And I think a lot of it has to do with how you ask the question. The state did actually send kind of a similar document to this infographic to CMS to get their input. And we did get some input back from them, but a lot of it is how you ask that question. Is it, boy, we really are hoping to try to, model this after what we have in Michigan. We think we have some great protections in place. How do we work together to make this work? Or, hey, this group gave us this proposal. Can you tell us what you think about it? And there's a way to ask the question to get an answer that you want to get, which I don't know, I just think that was kind of the response that we have received. Now, one of the things that me working with legislators on this issue has been trying to raise awareness with them, but for them to at least have the department ask the question at the federal government of, can we do this in an alternative way? We have mental health protections around conflict. We are a public system. The way we're funded is differently. Can we at least get a yes, no, maybe answer from them? They have started that process. But again, as I said, it depends on how you ask the question of what kind of answer you want to get back. And I also think, given the political influence that our state has with the current Biden administration, I would think that there would be some wiggle room that we would be able to receive. I don't know where those conversations have gone. I think we're going to continue now to move our conversations up to our congressional delegation, see if we can put some pressure on the federal government there to get some positive traction on this. So we've had multiple conversations. We're going to continue to talk to the department of how they roll this out, how they implement this. But it's just, I mean, again, it's been a multiple year dialogue and hoping to continue to at least try to meet in the middle the best we can and make this as easy to digest for individuals receiving services as well as our members trying to comply with the regulations.
And again, it has an October 1st deadline, is that correct?
That's what they've said now. I don't believe that they're going to stick to that deadline. I think it's going to continue to move beyond that. I think one of the reasons why this is being pushed now is a number of our big waivers that kind of dictate, control the services that we provide here in Michigan, kind of give us authorization. Those are up for renewal in front of the federal government. So I think the federal government is using that of, hey, Michigan, you're out of compliance with this. These waivers are up. Let's come into compliance here. Otherwise, we're not going to approve your waivers. So, I mean, that process is moving forward, and I do not think that they'll be done with that by October.
I think I know the answer to the question, but do they have any parents sitting on some of those committees that you're talking about? Because there's about 12 people in this room that I could tell you that would say, this is just crazy.
I mean, this is done, through the State Department. I know they have had listening sessions, things like that. Now, interestingly, when they've had their listening sessions, when parents, family members, individuals receiving services chimed in with their input, they're very much opposed to this approach. They're like, well, I don't want to have to tell my story multiple times. I don't want to have to go here to do intake, here to get my services. I want to go to one place. And, I mean, so they took their input, but they're still moving forward.
Who's the sponsor? Oh, sorry.
If there are parents on that committee who actually lived in our shoes and knew, because I'm telling you, there's 12 people in this room right now that would say, I can't do that. We can't do that.
No, to be clear, this is not a legislative initiative. This is not a bill. This is a state regulation that's done outside of the legislature. I mean, this is something that's done by the State Department through the bureaucrats that work there. So it is, while it is a public process when they have their input, it's very much done behind closed doors.
Feels like it should have sponsorship and not a bureaucratic decision. Wow.
Did this go through the JCAR process? There's no administrative rule?
Subject to that.
Okay.
Yeah, so there is no legislative oversight at all to this. I mean, this is something that, that the state promulgates rules that are, from the federal government, and there is no legislative oversight whatsoever.
So it's completely bureaucratic. Okay.
Further question?
I guess I just have one more. So would it be, do you have our legislators involved in talking to bureaucracy? Do you need, because we do have one fairly active representative in Lou Meerman. Yeah.
We've had, we issued through our station action alerts that we've done this. I think we sent out probably 5 emails that to both House, Senate members as well as the governor's office, so that have been informed. I mean, it's very tough because this is very much in the weeds. They're very much focused on things that are before the legislature. So that's why try to put an infographic and things like that to make it a little bit more simple. But I mean, anything, if this board has a resolution, I would suggest that you share that with the commission, that you share with your state legislator, as well as your congressional delegation as well. I mean, all of that certainly helps. I mean, we've been very active with MAC, the Association of Counties. We work very close with them, as you can imagine. So they are engaged on this as well. But we have been buds for quite some time on this, haven't been able to any traction on this.
Mr. Grant, did you have a question? Thought I saw you wave, sorry. Okay. Mr. Rackman.
So understand this, the legislature has completely delegated authority to this, to the Department of Human Services for the rulemaking process, and they've retained no oversight whatever, leaving, I guess, the only way to challenge this through, I guess, the rulemaking process or judicial or just an outright rebellion.
They have never They've never had any oversight of this, so there's nothing for them to delegate. So this will never under the legislation. The things that we tried to do, so they just Thursday morning, late Wednesday night, they passed the budget as Dr. Shears. One of the things that was put boilerplate that said, you, Michigan Department of Health, cannot do anything that is more restrictive, that adds layers regarding conflict-free access and planning, and force us to come to the table and work on that. We were not able to get that language in the budget, so we're not successful there. That is when one aims to have some level of influence. Outside of that, other than legislators asking questions of, hey, what the heck on that, they really have authority or power. The only power they have is approving the budget, and and then it has passed. So without that, without that kind of intense scrutiny, I mean, this is something that, I mean, they're relatively very little influence over.
Any further questions?
Having been engaged in this type of battle for many, many years, one of the options is you go to a legislative committee like a budget oversight committee, and you make recommendations. You may have legislators who are totally aligned with the process and agreement with you, and they even go as far as to put a funding restriction on budget approval. It is free to ignore, and they currently do, because we have various levels of influence and regulation that starts in Washington, and the garbage all flows down. And saying the DHS is an intermediary in the process, as you pointed out, that we have waivers that need routine with Washington to get them to allow us to continue what I believe is one of the best systems in the country. But we're one of the few states with those waivers that allow us to do it. And there's a precarious position that Lansing's in, where they just go to Washington and say, heck, no, we're going to do that. I mean, we have other regulations in the SC arena where restrictions were in Washington, and the providers were saying, this is ridiculous. It's totally appropriate. What do? You just capitulate? Or do you take advantage of every avenue? I mean, revenue. You go to the state legislature, get them involved, you buy in to the solutions, whether it makes a difference or not. You're on record. You go to CMHOC, you present your opinions there and hope to have some influence. You go to your federal representatives and try to get them to understand the issues and take some action in their it seems futile at times, but one would hope that sooner or later wisdom would prevail. And I think we need all of those things.
You articulated it very, very well. I mean, I've always argued that that you all are far better loss advocate than I will ever be. I have my legislature. I live in Cascade Township in Kent County. I have leadership with them, but I mean, I think family members, individuals, community members in those individual districts. Those are the voices they need to hear, not for people that look like me in Lansing talking. I mean, I think your voice talking to them, the families that you have around talking to them, I think ultimately make the difference. And frankly, they make a difference with the department as well. I mean, I think they do want to hear from the families and people sort of what does this mean. So when they have those open input opportunities to present it, though, to be vocal, to give them feedback, I think that certainly helps, as well as sometimes with these waivers, CMS will have open comment periods. I think advocate, I think is very influential. I think they're very sensitive on what the impact of this is actually impact people that actually need services. So we're continuing to do the system on behalf of the people that are served, but I think your individual bases are very much needed and very much appreciated.
A lot of information with big impact, definitely.
So there's enough information to consider a resolution opposing MDHH's implementation plan of conflict-free access and plan. If you wanted to do that, you could.
I personally am not for that, just state the alternatives being proposed.
Yeah. We can keep looking at next month.
Or it could be a resolution that actually protects self-determined implement. I mean, is there a way that in language we could write it?
Yeah, the way it really has, it does have an impact to the self-D side, but not nearly already built in protects to make that kind of work. But yeah, we could craft some additional language to ensure that's protected as a body for sure. With the group and other groups to help shape that language and bring back up for you next board meeting. But in the meantime, legislators, we can do stuff independent as a resident to educate them on that. And I know I can be an active part of that if the board so wishes.
Has done any federal outreach?
We've had a number of conversations. We have a working relationship with kind of the health champion in Washington D.C. We've had conversations with her. I mean, she's very much focused on the DHC implementation across the nation. But we continue to reach out to the rest of the congressional delegates, leaders, and others to raise
discussion. Thank you.
Thanks,
very
Alan.
much. All right. Now, I have a motion.
So moved.
For support.
Support.
And discussion. We have questions. Is Bill here? There he is, right in front of me. Glasses today, but
Morning. I'm here to seek support for 2 contracts. The first one is with Community Healing Centers, and this is an agency with contract substance use disorder services, and there's still a substance use disorder service contract for 3 of the more the long-term residential, and whenever it's ready to step down and into a lower level, typically we want to have the person to our community take that on, but they're preparing to stay in town to get that. So we're asking for 2 to be added to this contract, which is the clinically managed low-intensity short-term residential and clinically managed population-specific short-term residential. So it's kind of like that, we're all, kind of like a place. They have to develop and we're ready fees through the contract to increase our service rate.
Questions?
Can you tell us where the goals and therapies, exam 1 and 3.3 care? What are the goals and therapies of this ASAM 3.1 and 3.3 level of care?
It focuses on a different level of detoxification and then outpatient substance use disorder treatment. So that's done within the applied standards for that level of care for that type of clinical intervention. So in terms of specific treatment goals, it varies on every individual that's in that level. Use disorder treatment in different outpatient and residential detox and substance use services. So the particular organization that has an array of services in multiple groups, SUD services is one of them. But for any clinical service like detox or outpatient SUD, what's actually the theoretical approach to care is actually across the country. So, and it's a individual payment plan. So I don't know if that helps hard into the goal 1 detox, goal 2 identify the variables related to continued substance use, goal 3 recovery, principles. But it's done within the specific credentialing and oversight of licensed clinicians with very specific standards. So if one was to look at an organization's website and say, boy, they seem to support this thing over here and that thing over here, that doesn't form the clinical process that happens at the level of care. It's just an organization supporting principles that are out there. Because I know when I look at the website for this contract, I'm like, wow, there are various social justice and various other activities, but that doesn't form the practice that specific service unless the individual seeking the service identifies that as a part of their treatment. But one of our contract oversight things that I want to look at is if any organization is endorsing or supporting a type of world voice and disclosure in those. So if I'm, say, in private practice as a psychologist and I'm using, and that's how you deal with theoretical approach to clinical model, and there's disclosure and choice of any other thing that's influencing it. So that was a long-winded answer. I'm looking at thinking about seriously. We've had this contract since 2016. We've added different components of care, but any social service organization or provider may say, I'm in sort of this or I'm an ally of that, but that doesn't necessarily inform the therapeutic approach to care. It's just an organization saying they support such class groups. So I know that that's kind of what we want to look at when we're looking at contracts is the clinical approach to care is a choice of disclosure of how that provider delivers care and the thoughtful approach. We can do that. We can ask those questions.
Yeah, I guess you've answered my question, but I follow related question to that one. How does the mission and vision values make it qualified to provide a 3.3 level of care?
How do theirs? Their mission and vision may not be related to the requirements to be a treatment provider for that specific clinical array of services. The mission and vision will capture a philosophical position of what they think the vision is, but the actual criteria to be a provider is very specific. So credentialing requirements and documentation requirements, therapeutic intervention in this context, in this contract, detox, substance abuse thing. So is there a one-to-one relation sometimes in the vision to the approach? Sometimes, but one thing we have to ask, like if you're out there saying, hi, we're the clinic of psychoanalysis, and somebody didn't know that, and I didn't know the care psychoanalyst, that's part of choice and disclosure. So we have to make sure that our clinical contracts indeed looking at like what's the approach to care, is it in the accepted array of care evident and such for the clinical interventions, and I take it very seriously, and that will be a component in us looking at contract providers. Your approach care and what's normally accepted in care is very, very appropriate to ask.
Clarification. Understood, Bill. This particular individual that is on zoo currently receiving this, correct? Okay. And they've achieved a certain level that would actually require under normal circumstances to transfer back to Ottawa County. So how many days, I appreciate that, but we're at a certain level of recovery. How many days are we looking at? And is this the most cost-effective methodology?
Yeah, it's the only level of care in town. It'd be the same provider. So you come back here, it'd be in Kalamazoo still. And it's just a step down in terms of the frequency and duration of the care. And the estimated time frame, that's a good question. So like the length of the average problem included in these descriptions, because even though individualized, we can say usually it's 15 days, usually it's 6 days. So we should put that information there.
For cost per
Yeah, say, again, we have to look at our whole contractual, because right, we check a box, it's this amount of money from 0 to 8. Well, we're actually sophisticated enough to give you an estimated guess on what the average length of stay is and our utilization. It's getting a better book.
Exactly.
So it's like, oh, $20,000 thing, not up to $250,000 thing. And that's what I was getting at earlier. We have to really look at how we're presenting that in scrutiny, because I, as executive director, can't even make heads and tail over. Is it going to cost me $250,000 of life? Because we just give you range.
That range, right?
And some of that is related to how often do you want to back contracts, which is minor change thing that needs to be discussed comprehensively with a committee called the Finance Committee of the CMH Board. If not, we're faced once again with a 2-hour explanation, and that's forced on level of care building, and then forced to vote going, I'm either going to trust what Bashir says or I totally get it.
Exactly.
And that's like a weird position to be in.
Ms. Rhodey.
And I'm speculating here, but I'm guessing this is kind of scenario studies, value care. They feel connected. They've told these providers they don't necessarily want to go to tell their story over again because they're already connected. This is working for them and it makes sense to continue.
Yes, so relationship accounts for 8% of the change, not technique.
Right,
So
right.
that's a huge variable. My thing, I have to make sure there's closure and choice. This is our approach. This is how we do. Do you know that before you want a situation or a family that has, not in this case, this is talk, but family that has a guardian, does the guardian know the service that we're offering has a theoretical orientation to care that's fully disclosed? I'm good at flushing that stuff and making people say, yeah, that's what it is. And you have to do that in good clinical practice. Any good clinical clinician gives you a case conceptualization, how they view change happens through. So we have to be careful, because if I look at any website, there may be one thing on there, I'm like, well, that's their service. So we got to dig into that. Or again, you have to, she say like leprechauns. Does that mean leprechaun therapy is the way they're going to, you know what I'm saying? So trying to make it a much more complicated decision focused on choice disclosure and clinical approaches to care versus what an organization may endorse on their website for a month or forever. You know, because gee, I'll tell you, that'd be tough to wrestle through.
I'd have to say, like, I would get concerned that we would have buyers at this time because so many providers have put those kinds of statements on their website.
Correct.
And I think part of it's because there's been a movement to do that.
Correct.
And so, you know, I think those are important conversations to have. And I'm really thankful that we're going to be looking at those things because it is important, especially with roach and stuff. But we need to make sure we also have providers.
Yeah, we're in an network of providers, but doing due diligence to understand therapeutic approaches is just as valid and necessary.
It is.
Speaking therapeutic approaches, they're certified, they're billing.
Right.
Okay, so right, I mean,
That's not
leprechaun therapy isn't.
right. Yeah, that's not
certified by
determined by one individual, Dr. Mike Bashir's. It's determined by a lot of certifications. Now, ARF will say statements that's important, and some you say might not be CARF. So if the survey is a thumbs up, thumbs down, even though I'll have a lot to say looking at it, it's really just assuming that they're practicing with best practices and high services. I just want to choice disclosure of certain approaches. That's the way on my end to make sure we're meeting our obligation. Who we're doing business with.
Any further questions? Want to move on to the next contract?
So one of these videos got to the community, so then other parts of activities that are available. Part of this is the initial quote was for $24,000, and team for the person department, and we're able to get some videos, some audio, pictures, all that. But being able to get probably go back and say, oh, so that's close to the whole thing together.
Well done.
I'm glad to hear that because that was going to be my comment. There should be a great collaboration. Let's say we have a parks and this promotes them too. So the collaboration would be great. So I appreciate hearing that.
Questions or comments?
Yeah, a couple comments. I see this is identified as a new contract type. I think first the point, I think last meeting that they're new. My question is like, is the cost benefit analysis performed, is that set to be presented to the board? And the other thing is that I struggle with a contract like this is the purpose of the contract, which I guess by necessity, it's very generalized. So it can come to being somewhat vague. And I think for me individually, it'd be helpful in making an informed decision it's like, you know, these providers can give us a presentation, show us, demonstrate with examples we're proposing to illustrate, you know, like a market services or you know, the county parks. So.
Yeah, and I see that as like our job to get those presentations, do that, and bring it forward to you.
Right. Isn't this all that we kind of ask them to do something for us very specifically? So it's not like kind of in a vacuum, we create something for us that they we might want. We don't want, but we have technical expertise to put together. So this is a PR firm kind of, and we worked with them quite a bit, and they were really spot on. So we need to know what we want them to do. You know, what is it?
Good question. All right, seeing none. We want to vote on these contracts individually all at once. Thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Yep, I'm sorry. I got hearing Bill, please, as well. So, all right, the motion is, we'll do it individually. And that is the June 24th service contracts, as Bill has approved the service contracts with first. I'll say, community healing centers. Those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Same sign.
No.
Motion passes. The next service contract as presented is Rebel. All those in favor of passing the contract as presented, please say aye. Sign.
No.
And motion passes. Moving on to FY 24 May financial statement. Amy Babatel suggested motion is true. The FY May financial as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Some discussion.
You know, the financial report, I have these statements. You know, I of this broadly to show how our budget is and we're over. Problem I always have coming into these meetings to review and approve. And I think maybe a subcommittee would be helpful here, because I feel like today has been sort of like that orientation meeting we should have had.
Right.
And so I really struggle with these, and I find myself just not that you crunch the numbers correctly, but have any sense of context of any of this for the revenues and the expenses. I really don't know what the significance it is that our budget a certain dollar amount, or that our expenses are. I mean, I don't know how adequate our revenues are to each of those items, or how well we're meeting with the expenses. I really don't understand how many consumers are we serving for each of these items, how well they're being served, and is there a gap, between the revenue and expenses. So it's a real struggle for me going through this, to really appreciate the meaning of it. And I think that a subcommittee really flush this out and better inform us before we come here and then rebel vote. And frankly, I just don't have I'm not informed, I think, individually to be comfortable, with that. So again, that's where I say we just need more information about coming to these meetings to do.
Any other discussions? I think I hear Mr. Ryan say he's volunteering for the finance committee subcommittee.
I think it's fair to say.
I think we help too. I agree. I absolutely agree. It's a large budget. I think it's 4 million, but I think it's gone up like 6 million. Yeah, we're getting close to 70 million. It's a lot. So,
As we were continuing it, and so I'll go ahead and put it, the
right. Yes.
It's a question too. I'm trying to understand the consequences of this report. We have a budget for dollars for Medicare. That comes to the PIHP, which holds, is it in lump sum, or is it based on submitted for refund from the PIHP? So we have no fund balance as such that we're holding. PIHP have a fund balance.
Yes, the PIHP is the fund balance, and we are paid kind of a combination. Actually, funds come right at the beginning of the year. The LRE kind of approves that through the first quarter. We have monthly reporting of all of our account admissions, all of our expenses paid, that spend adjusted based on actual activity, divided by program, funding source, funding eligibility, all the waivers included in that, different components indicate that fund different source. So we're reimbursed. Some of the reimbursements happen at prepayment, and some happen at within the first month. Some are quarterly. CMHOC has really a timeline after that. We have budget adjusted up to the moment for approval, but it is managed based on projection and initial spending plan that we can tweak at any time that would be presented here if we change our spending plan.
Okay, that leads to a question that I previously had raised that I don't know that I fully understand. If we have funds that are advanced to us, the county holds that money. If we have funds that come directly to us at the level, the county would hold that money. That involves money front. The county would hold money. Is that money held in a preserving instrument? And where is that income credited? Is it credited to the agency? Does the county keep that? I don't see any listing here for income unless it's under other revenue.
I'll look at the fund line, but we do earn interest on some of the revenues. It depends on the type and the timing of the receipt, but the grants paid in arrears, we've already had the expense report and get refunded for most grants. State general fund is not something that we can earn interest on, so that's separate. Medicaid revenues is the same. Our earnings on those payments is for actual expenses and return any funds that weren't used. As far as we have that are like donations or unrestricted, those would be eligible for drain within the operation. So if you're saying the funding that we have that's in our bucket, that interest that's earned at that time could build in our own account. That we have to report in the return to, of course, not something the county keeps. It stays in our general ledger for CM.
It would feel like much would be interest generating since it comes from taxpayers. Great question. Okay. So, let's step away. Are there any questions? Motion is to approve the FY24 year revenue adjustment as presented. Let's go to a roll call because we are dealing with
Well, the first is a
financial statement. Sorry, I missed the financial. I apologize. Okay. To approve the financial statement as presented. We go to a roll call vote.
Yes.
Yes.
No, and this is not a reflection of your work at all. It's really mobile on my concerns I had expressed.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion passes. And now I'm moving on to the suggested motion to FY 2024 year revenue adjustments as. Do you have a motion?
Moved.
Is there discussion? Hearing none. Go ahead and do a roll call on this as well.
Yes.
No, for Cambridge.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Motion passes. Yay, we're on to information only. It's a April SRC attachment G. And Amy, you're still up.
So this is through, any questions on that, or, kind of report, this is 1 month back, reporting, so if you remember what we month row, where continuing to help we acknowledge that community negotiation was something we're adjusting for. We had a balance, between our revenue that is spending. A surplus, I should say, pending balance.
Are there any estimations of cost of the contract yet?
We have a number because it was proposed for the budget, but I don't know. 0.3 billion initial, and I don't know all the positions were given that. And if that was retroactive, some of those terms weren't.
An approximation is what you're working with.
I'm supposed to get more detail from the county any day.
Okay, wonderful. Any further questions? All right, thank you. Amy. All right, next on this FY 2025 position request, the attachment H, and Dr. Bashir, you're on.
Yeah, so in our process of the budgeting process every year, each department, it's recommended position changes, either application of existing positions to a different level or a new position. So I've been in the process of putting together with our team what we're estimating for new positions and reclassifications. I had a meeting with our team, with HR, and with the county administrator, and with the county financier, going through that process. In July, I intend to bring these positions for reclassification and new positions to this board before it goes to any county for approval. County has to ultimately approve our and any position changes, but this board has to be in my opinion, authorize me to then put those forward implications of new requested or reclassification changes. So I'm just alerting you that next month, positions that we're recommending, but be advised that hands of discussion have already had county administrator, the finance department, HR, so that when you see these, you go, what does the county think? I can already tell you. Right. But in my belief that this board is the primary approver for this budget, including positions, and we shouldn't even be recommending the county position just this board's approval. So I'm just letting you know that that's going to happen in July. I did it this month, which is not quite ready yet. At the county level, they're looking still. So cooperating with the county, but making sure this board is the primary approver of anything that's moved forward.
You know approximately how many positions?
I can't remember. It was like 6 new positions, a bunch of locations. One of the things we're looking at is a systems change in how we deliver support coordination. One, right now we have a couple of support leaders, a whole bunch of aides. The system and the support coordinators doing all the person-centered planning document, and the aides are priming the monthly visit. Problem is then the support coordinator has 100 of these plans to do, and there can be a disconnect of who's monitoring the consumer and who's meeting the plans. So to deal with that disconnect, sometimes we have people in the same meeting. You can only have one person's bill in these meetings. So there's sometimes we have duplication of people because of our model. So we're just taking a model change where all our aides to support coordinators to get the eligibility to do so. So that families, guardians are dealing with the same person, and it helps us improve our customer service requirements, all kinds of things that can be a struggle when you have different people trying to do it. I need to ensure that support coordinators are all defined the same. It was a good model for a long time. It just doesn't fit in my anymore of what we're trying to do. A family support coordinator, and it's the same person monitoring monthly, it's working with the family instead of, I don't know, let me ask them to and so it's family level, who's actually guiding the ship? This was a recommendation from Turkey and the team there. So it's in line with something they've been thinking about for a while conceptually. So that's like one of the major things you'll see is a philosophical shift on how we deliver supports coordination, which by the way, would respect the conflict-free planning process. So I'm just looking ahead and doing that. It means those single employees, we get a reclassification, promotion up, it's financial increase, and it validates the wording a little more. So I like it for those. So you'll see that it's really a lot of reclassifications based on philosophical change from new positions. What's not on the list now to add is the general reciprocal capability. But I want to have more discussion with you next month on that and my plan to look at rights department and what we should do and that we haven't considered rights, which makes it problematic in the first place. But
So also the therapeutic relationship development.
Yeah.
too, so, Had for Dr. Bashir's in the past as an organizational chart, and an organizational chart. I know it's work at some point if we could get something like this, especially when we're making some adjustments like this, right?
yeah, it'd be nice to see before and after. Like here's before and here's recommended changes. It looks like you can see the changes. And so absolutely.
Thank you. Any other?
If I could speak in support of your proposals, I think your concept of combining the sports coordinators and aides and head shop was wonderfully welcome.
All right. So moving on to information, comments, and meetings attended. I just want to announce that we are going to have, it's been announced and noticed today, I believe, an executive transition committee meeting on 2024 10 a.m. here at our complex and conference room. And we will be meeting to discuss kind of next steps and our recruitment of hiring an executive director for our community mental health of Ottawa County. So look for that on our website. Next up is public comment. Those who are interested in public comment, please come to the podium. You have 3 minutes to address the chair and state your name and where you vote from.
Hi, my name is Julie Norgley. I'm from Grand Haven. And I really enjoyed Dr. Bashir's presentation earlier in the meeting. The CCBHC, I think it's really important. As a community member, I've looked into it a little bit, and it's, like you said, really confusing, hard to sort out. One thing that wasn't mentioned in that discussion was the mental health millage and how that relates to the CCBHC. I think there's a high correlation between the CCBHC and the mental health millage. And I think that when it was implemented, the timing all happened around the same time, around 2016. And I think there was a lack of transparency. I think that the CCBHC kind of came into existence at the same time as the mental health millage. And it looks like a lot of the mental health millage money went to fund requirements for establishing a CCBHC, because CCBHC has requirements for things like social recreation programs. I know a lot of the money went to the school network, but it looks like it looks like a large portion of the grant money for establishing the CCBHC went to efforts like building a client list, recruiting clients at these auxiliary points for CCBHC, maybe for CMH. I don't understand how it all fits together, but the timing with Can Do going away, Mentum Center filling the void, and being funded with the mental health millage, I think there's a high correlation there that and the lack of transparency that would be really interesting as a member of the public to understand how that all fits together. And then it was also interesting that you brought up how the state budget is not really meeting the needs of the community. And I wonder if there's, again, something similar like the CCBHC. Does it really meet the needs of the community mental health, or is it, because it looks like it's a whole plan to usher in socialized medicine, like and you said it, like transforming the way the system works. And so I have a lot of concerns. So thank you for addressing it, and thank you for looking into it, and for the good work. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Denise House, and I vote in Holland Township. I'm just here as a weary parent. As you know, we have two with special needs. The one youngest has turned 27 now, and 28. And this month, like every other month, has just been frustrating. Our daughter, she keeps getting hurt. Things keep happening. She's excessively obese, exercise, but they think they just tell her to go for a walk or to do something and she can do it. She has organic brain damage due to prenatal alcohol use, and she had a mild stroke pre-birth. So she just keeps gaining weight, and is the solution I'm supposed to drive to Grand Rapids every day and take her for a couple walks? I can't do that. I babysit my son 40 hours a week, and I have my other special needs child who lives with us, and we have two more daughters. So I'm just getting frustrated. I called our caseworker a week ago, never hear from him. We need to get her out of there. We need to get her in something else. But if I don't hear from them, and I don't have the time to chase after them all the time. Sitting here, I had 2 phone calls from my daughter and 1 call from the group home. So, but our son, he is also special needs. He lives with us because of the housing crisis in Ottawa County. And my husband told him when he retires in 6 years, he's going to have an alternate living situation. He was horrified. But we're tired. I'm turning 60 in a few months. And like I said, we've been dealing with, they were born, adopted them. But our son, for some CLS for him. And we were told, yep, your mom and your sister, we can just keep doing it. My daughter is 21. She's currently at Camp Sunshine as a counselor volunteer this week again. This is the 4th session she's done. She works for Ready for Hope College. She works at Hope Crisis Network. She's a full-time college student. We're just supposed to do this. I'm just tired. I'm frustrated. I just don't know how long we can do this. But there's no other options. We leave them in the system, and she just keeps getting hurt in these group homes, and they don't care about her mental health. And I can tell you my mental health is struggling right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment?
Rosalie Austin, City of Holland. I just want to reiterate, conflict-free access and planning is not a bad, it's been in the works since 2014. But it's just how does it affect the other populations? But it's all about separating the providers from the payer and one source making all those decisions. Conflict-free helps the consumer hopefully be informed about their options, will go choose their own pages and pages of provider network directory. And I think it's a big subject that needs to be researched more before you make any decision to oppose it, because other states are doing it and it needs to be done. And I want to know about the RFPs for the millage, and will that be on the website, and how other nonprofits can apply for that, and what has the steering committee come up with that?
Thank you. Okay, any other public comment? Before I adjourn this meeting, I want to invite you to stay on the community nurse and state meet and greet. We have one remaining candidate for Director of Community Mental Health, that is Dr. Brashears. And this meeting is adjourned.